today I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've used Zunes in my classroom over the last year. And I'm going to go through some practical applications of how I've used it in my 8th grade history classroom. And just give you the nuts and bolts of what's working, what students think, and what our experiences have been over the last about 5 to 6 months. I teach 8th grade American history in Liberty, Missouri. Liberty, Missouri is a suburb just outside of Kansas City. We're about 20 minutes away from downtown Kansas City. And I teach exclusively 8th grade during the day. I have 6 different sections of students. And what we did with our pilot was we used the pilot with one of the in that classroom. Can you guys all hear me? All right. Currently this year I'm also serving as Missouri Teacher of the Year. I've been able to travel quite a bit. And it's been interesting that I can talk a little bit about using the Zunes and also other types of technology in our classroom. So this started, I started doing a podcast 3 years ago called Speaking of History, and I talk about history, education, and technology. And I use a program called Audacity, which is a free program that runs on any platform. And this is mainly for other teachers. So I started to think of ways that I could have my students use a podcast or some kind of MP3 file in their classroom. And so I started something 3 years ago called StudyCast. And all I do is basically sit down with a microphone and I talk about what I would talk with a student about as they perform for a unit test. So if we have a test coming up about the American Revolution, for example, they have a study guide that they kind of follow that's a paper copy. But it's almost like I'm sitting at a table with them, kind of reminding them maybe of the story that I told, that I kind of click for them as they study. And I put it up on the school server, so it's linked to our classroom page. And students have a variety of ways that they can listen to it. They can listen to it at home on the website, or if they don't have internet at home, they can also burn it to a CD form, and they can take a CD. The problem that I had was it was hard to know if students always are getting their content, because most of my students have internet connections, but not all of them. And then some students might forget to ask me for the CD. So last year when I was at NECC in Atlanta, I stopped by the Microsoft booth, and I'm kind of a gadget junkie guy. I have a couple of iPods and a couple of MP3 players and Zunes and stuff. And so I went up to Kathy Richardson and said, hey, I would really love to use this in my classroom. Is there any way that you guys are thinking about possibly doing a pilot or anything like that? We would love to be guinea pigs for it and see this in our classroom. So I talked to Kathy last year, and she was able to help us out by giving us 25 Zunes. And what I did was I picked one of my 6 classes to be the pilot. Of course, the class that I picked on, they were my favorite class, but they were only the selection because it was right after my planning periods, and I had a little bit of time when I needed to set something up and things like that. So we did this the 2nd semester of last year. So we started this in January, and we ended our school year at the end of May. And we had a great parent night kickoff. Kathy actually flew in on her way to a conference and came in, and we talked to all the parents and talked about how they would be able to use this in school, what they were able to do with it at home. And the parents were probably as excited about the pilot as the students were. So we started this in January, and I had already been creating some content with audio. But the cool thing about the Zune is that it has basically 3 different formats of media. It has 3 different formats of media: video, audio, and then the images. And so I'm going to describe a couple different ways that I've used each of these formats. Because one of the things that I really try to stress in my classroom is everyone's not going to learn with the same learning style. I do a learning style inventory with my students, and I usually have about half kinesthetic, about a quarter auditory, and about a quarter are music. So by using these different formats, I can reach a lot of different students at their optimal learning level. So for example, let's start with audio first. The StudyCast I've already described. The neat thing about the StudyCast was I could give it to my students without hooking up any wires. One of the neat things about the Zunes is you can wirelessly beam somebody content. So for example, if I'm listening to the latest Carrie Underwood song, and I'm like, hey, you gotta listen to this, if you have a Zune, I can beam it to you wirelessly. And you can listen to it up to 3 times for free. It doesn't charge you anything. So my students can come up and say, hey, Mr. Langhorst, can you give me the StudyCast? And I can beam it to them just as they're standing there at the desk. In a matter of about 2 minutes, they walk away with the StudyCast. Now, if I beam it to them, they can only listen to it up to 3 times. And later on, when I talk about how I can also give it to them, where they can listen to it 1,000 times. The podcast that I do called Speaking of History, if I'm somewhere, I might go to a museum or I might talk to somebody from a historic site. Later today, I'm going to go to the Alamo and do a little podcast from the Alamo. So when we talk about the Alamo next year in class, I've got that podcast for Speaking of History, and I can download it to all their Zunes, and they can listen to my experience, or if I get to interview somebody at the Alamo, what that's like, so I can bring it into the classroom. Also, weekly lesson plans. I do stuff like an audio format, just talking about what's going on that week. I put it up on my website, and then my parents can listen to it in a matter of like 5 minutes to find out what's going on in class. Then the students also have something on their Zunes. Maybe they want to know, hey, I can't remember what day we have the test, what's due today. They can go back and look at it. So the audio one is probably the format that people think of the most. But the ones that really probably got the kids the most excited was the images. Now, initially when I thought of images, I thought of family pictures and stuff like that. But all the stuff that I do in my classroom as far as notes are PowerPoint presentations. And as I'm sure most of you guys are aware, you can save a PowerPoint as an image collection. You just hit Save As, JPEG, and it creates a folder for you and it's done in like 10 seconds. So what I was able to do with my notes was send them the notes both wirelessly or by plugging in the USB and dropping and dragging it onto their Zoom. So I literally had students last year that came in and said, Mr. Langhorst, I missed class, yesterday I was sick. Could I get the notes from yesterday? I have it on my Zoom. They pull the Zoom out of their pocket and I beam it to them, and in a matter of 2 minutes they walk away with their notes we talked about in class. So that was a really neat application, and they had the notes. They had all the notes for the entire unit on their Zoom when they were home, and they didn't have to worry about taking home an extra notebook or a textbook and things like that. Flashcards. This actually came from another teacher about midway through the semester. My Spanish teacher in our building, she came to me and she said, hey, it's cool that you're doing all that stuff with the Zunes. I do PowerPoint flashcards for my Spanish students, and what I would like to have you do is put my flashcards on their Zunes. And so anybody that's doing anything with flashcards could also easily put it on Zoom. And I can pass this around later if you want to talk to me. The notes that I do, I typically use about 40 size font, and they can easily see it on their Zoom. It's got a beautiful screen, and it comes out very, very clear. So one of the things we're going to utilize next year a little bit more is other teachers from other subjects are going to be able to just send me their content through the network or through an email, and I'm going to plop it on the kids at home. Also, maps and paintings. Again, you might think, well, this is like a really small screen to send a map of some kind. But I actually did this during our Civil War unit, and I sent them some maps that we were using for discussion. And on the Zoom, you can zoom in on stuff. And so even though it's a small screen, you can zoom all around the picture and bring it up pretty good. And the students said they actually enjoyed being able to have that map and have it with their notes and that kind of stuff. And then also we do some analysis of some historical paintings. For example, Washington crossing the Delaware. We talk about some of the inaccuracies and that kind of stuff. And so when we do that assignment, I give them the painting, and then for homework, they have that with them. They can look at it and analyze it the next day. Video looks really good on the Zoom, and we use a Microsoft product called Photo Story 3. It's a free download, and it allows you to take digital stills and then make that into a video. So one of the assignments that I have my students do is they create an Abraham Lincoln election ad from 1860 using that program. And it has to be 1 minute in length, and if we talk about the election, what would Lincoln emphasize in the election? But when they got done this year, I took all of their videos. We had 8 different groups of students. I put all of those videos on their Zooms, and then their homework assignment was to go and look at everybody else's video, and then we critique it the next day. So really what I'm doing with the Zoom in many ways is giving them content to go home and look at, whether it's a picture or they're listening to content that I've given them as a podcast. They have their homework with them when they take the Zoom.